Hey Mom, just let us know when you kick the bucket. We need the money fast.
Scott is the oldest, so your inheritance belongs to us. I've always hated you. Such a boring old hag, always so serious.
Yeah, a truly boring mom she was.
It's said that the human hearing functions until the moment of death. Imagine hearing such words at your final hour. Horrifying. Fury overcame me and I stood up, slapping Scott across the face. Let's go back about a year ago. My name is Alice. My husband Samuel and I weren't blessed with children, but we lived happily as a couple. Our life was nothing but peace. Both of us were gentle and never quarreled. We had no expensive hobbies, leading to tranquil days. But then, one day, that peace was shattered. My mother, living at her home, fell ill. My father, who was a well-known executive of a major corporation, passed away a few years ago, and my mother lives alone in her home. We had no children, so we had often asked her to live with us, but she always refused, saying, "I'm okay, I can still live on my own." But now, due to this illness, she was almost bedridden and would have to remain hospitalized unless someone took care of her. Scott, my older brother, vehemently refused to care for her. Scott and his wife Karen had a young child, so I could understand their refusal. The only ones left who could take care of her were Samuel and me. I braced myself for a divorce or separation and asked Samuel, "Please, Samuel, I want my mom to live in her home, where so many memories of my dad still linger, for as long as she can move. Please let me go home and take care of her." At my desperate plea, Samuel seemed surprised at first, but then he smiled gently.
Well, if that's the case, maybe we should sell this house. It's just a rental, and if your mother-in-law is okay with us living with her, we won't need this house anymore.
Huh? Are you coming with me, Samuel?
Of course, I'm your husband, Alice. I want to live under the same roof with you always.
Tears welled up by Samuel's words. I was so happy to be married to such a kind person. I was truly blessed. My mother found it hard to walk, and she became less and less capable of eating and using the bathroom by herself. Samuel, without any complaints, worked hard with me to take care of her. Our mother was pleased with gentle Samuel. While chatting, she would say every day, "Alice is truly fortunate to be married to a man like Samuel." The progression of my mother's illness was much faster than we or the doctors had thought. With each new thing she became unable to do, she would be filled with sadness and occasionally take out her frustration on us. Each time she would apologize and cry. Seeing her in such pain, all I could do was say, "It's okay, you'll be alright," and cry with her. By the time Christmas approached, she had lost the ability to converse properly. Her speech had become so impaired that she could only communicate through writing. Missing her bright laughter, I was feeling a touch of loneliness when my brother Scott contacted me.
"Hello, Alice. I'm planning to visit Mom for Christmas this year. It might be the last time."
"Don't say such unlucky things, but I'm happy that you'll come to see Mom. We'll be waiting for you." I had always kept my brother updated about our mother's condition via text, but he almost never replied. Even though our mother had loved us equally, I thought it was quite cruel of him. So when I heard he would be visiting for Christmas, I was truly glad. Scott and his wife Karen left their kids at Karen's parents' house and came to our home for Christmas. I thought they left their kids with Karen's parents out of consideration for our mother, but when I thanked Karen, she casually said, "Kids would just get in the way," which surprised me. Not having any kids myself, I wouldn't understand, but I thought it would be better if I never understand the feeling of calling one's own child a nuisance. Scott and Karen were entirely thinking that they were a guest. Scott entered the room next to the living room where our mother was and asked,
"Hey, still kicking?"
When our mother silently nodded, Karen said, "Doesn't it smell in here? Mom should take a bath every day." It was absurd. Even though our mother can't speak, she can hear perfectly. Due to her illness, she's lost almost all her physical abilities and can't take a bath. I wipe her body every day, but there's a certain smell specific to sick people that can't be removed. I thought they were extremely rude. After watching Scott and Karen go back to the living room saying, "Let's have a drink," I whispered to our mother, "Are you okay?" She smiled slightly and nodded. In the living room on the other side of the door, Scott was ordering to Samuel, "I'm the guest here, fetch me some booze." I could imagine Samuel, who was a timid person, hurrying to the kitchen to get the alcohol. Feeling sorry for Samuel, I went to the living room. Samuel, who was about to place a can of beer in front of Scott and Karen, looked relieved when he saw me and said, "Thanks, Alice." Scott has always been ill-tempered and doesn't get along with Samuel. His wife Karen is the same type of person. "Bring more booze," she ordered Samuel, already having emptied several cans of beer. Without saying anything about our mother recently, my brother Scott and his wife Karen only discussed how much of our father's inheritance was left, or how jealous they were of us living in our family home with no rent. Scott and Karen just seemed focused on money.
"You're making a pretty penny, aren't you, Samuel? Must be nice, Alice. You found a rich man and married him. Samuel's not even that good looking. You're just blinded by the money, right?"
"What? No way. Can you stop saying such unpleasant things?" Samuel, being a kind man, kept a smile on his face despite the rude comments from my brother. Karen, too drunk by this point, says, "We don't have money because we're always drinking," and clumsily gets up. "Karen, where are you going?" Instead of going to the bathroom, Karen stood up and opened the door to the room where our mother was sleeping. Karen, with a sneaky grin, said something outrageous at our mother's bedside. "Dear mother-in-law, Scott and I are in dire financial straits. Please go to heaven soon and leave us a lot of money."
That's right. It's best for our mother to pass away soon. Free Alice and Samuel.
Scott, drunk, responds to Karen's words loudly. As I was frozen in anger, Samuel, who had been smiling next to me, suddenly stood up.
Please leave. What? What did you say? Please leave. I cannot bear to host people who could say such things to a bedridden person even for a single night.
Saying this, Samuel took a few bills from his wallet and handed them to my brother.
Get a room nearby and leave by tomorrow.
Scott and Karen looked dumbfounded, but seemed happier about receiving the money. They quickly cheered up and exclaimed, "Yay!" and left our house. I knew what kind of people Scott and Karen were, but it was my fault for inviting them into this house. When I tearfully apologized to our mother, who was making a sad face on the bed, she wrote on a memo pad she had at hand, "It's okay, I have prepared everything for after I'm gone." Samuel and I continued to care for our mother as best we could. However, we were told by a doctor that it was becoming difficult for her to continue living at home. She started to become more vacant throughout the day and began asking the same questions over and over, even in hand. Just as the doctor suggested, we decided to admit her to the hospital. Still, Samuel and I visited her almost daily. We messaged Scott to inform him that Mom may not have much time left, but it was only read and ignored. Our mother began to fade, and the time to say goodbye was drawing near. It happened on a summer morning. When my smartphone rang, I already had a bad feeling. The call was from the hospital, informing us that our mother was in critical condition. Samuel and I immediately headed to the hospital and simultaneously informed my brother that our mother was critically ill. Once at the hospital, the doctor explained her condition to us, and I held her hand. "Mom, are you okay? Please don't leave me behind just yet." Mom slightly squeezed my hand in return, but her feeble grip brought tears to my eyes. I was flooded with memories of her cheerful smile as I realized this was our goodbye. Samuel comforted me by patting my back as I wept. His eyes were also filled with tears, and he reassured me, "Mom has fought hard enough." Just then, the hospital room door opened. It was my brother and Karen, his wife. Karen entered the room and immediately mocked Samuel and me by saying, "Trying to look like the good kids, huh?" I was shocked by their cruelty, even at Mom's last moment. My brother and Karen started to speak near our dying mother.
Hey Mom, you better tell us when you kick the bucket. We need the money soon.
"Since Scott is the eldest, your inheritance is ours. I always disliked you. You're such a boring old hag."
Yeah, you were indeed a boring mother.
It's said that one's hearing lasts until the moment of death. It pains me that these could be the last words my mother hears. Angered by their disrespect, I sprung up and slapped my brother's cheek.
What the hell are you doing?
"Get out! Stop bothering Mom!" My tearful outburst seemed to take them aback.
Alright, but we're definitely coming back for the money when Mom dies,
my brother warned before he and Karen left the room. Overwhelmed with regret, I tightened my grip on my mother's hand and repeated, "I'm sorry." My mom opened her eyes slightly, gave me a weak smile, and lifted herself up a little to pass me a notepad. There was a phone number written on it. I asked, "Do you want me to call this number?" And Mom quietly nodded. Beneath the phone number, she had shakily written, "Thank you." I couldn't stop my tears upon seeing this. Later that day, Mom passed away. I acted as the chief mourner at her funeral. Normally, this role would be taken by the eldest son, my brother. But given his behavior, I wasn't sure what he would do, so I stepped forward. My brother refused to take on the responsibility, saying it was too troublesome, so I became the chief mourner without a fuss. The funeral had gone without a hitch, and my mother was now resting in a small urn. I held my mother's urn crying, while my Samuel was moved to tears watching me. My brother Scott and his wife Karen made fun of us, saying we were putting on a good child act, something I couldn't forgive. Once the funeral was over, we'd have to talk about money. My mother, a director at a large corporation, left behind a significant fortune. Even if Scott and I were to split it, it would be quite a sum. Scott and Karen seemed excited about the prospect, but that excitement quickly faded. The lawyer I hired read out my mother's will, stating that all her assets would be inherited to me and Samuel. "What? Scott's the oldest, right? Why isn't he getting any money?"
"Because that's what your mother wished."
The lawyer, whose number my mother had left behind, spoke plainly. Apparently, my mother had been preparing to leave her assets to me and Scott even before she passed away. The lawyer, seemingly quite competent, explained why my mother didn't leave anything to Scott and Karen and her will. It was clearly stated in the will my mother left behind that me and Samuel were there for her when she was struggling, whereas Scott and Karen did nothing.
We can just ignore the will. We're struggling here. We took out a mortgage on the house thinking we'd get an inheritance. Please give me half.
That's right. We'd be in trouble if we suddenly couldn't get any money. I took a deep breath before responding to my fussing brother and his wife. Absolutely not. Scott, Karen, neither of you were there when Mom was suffering. You didn't even visit her. I'll never forget how you showed up when she was weak and told her to hurry up and go to heaven. I also won't forget the horrible things you said to Mom in the hospital at the end. I won't give you a single penny of Mom's money. As I firmly responded, my brother and his wife kept begging for money for a while, but they gave up and left after the lawyer told them to. When I told Scott not to contact me anymore because I didn't want to see him again, he shouted back, "Same here," but he soon contacted me asking for money again. Scott and Karen seemed to be in trouble, unable to pay their mortgage for the new house they bought, and seemed to have no choice but to rely on me. Scott kept working, but Karen quit her part-time job expecting to get Mom's inheritance, causing their household income to drop drastically. They had to lower their living standards considerably, but Karen couldn't stand it and they started arguing a lot. They thought they could manage by moving into the family home where I still lived, as it would mean no rent, and said they wanted to live together, but I refused. The ownership of this house had been transferred from my mother to me. Moving in without the owner's permission is not allowed, so when I explained that, Scott, who seemed to have been thinking of moving in by force, was at a loss for what to do. In the end, Karen, unsatisfied with their low standard of living, divorced. She took her child and went back to her parents' home, and seemed to have had to go back to her old job and work as a part-time employee. As for Scott, he tried to fix his inability to repay the loan by gambling, but ended up in a major loss. He got himself into a huge debt and is now living in a small, rundown apartment, scared of debt collectors. Several times, calls came asking for money, but each time I firmly responded, "I have no intention of lending you any money." Samuel and I are carefully maintaining and living in the family home where our memories of our mother remain. The inheritance we received from our mother, we've kept untouched in a separate bank account from the one we use regularly. It's the money that our father and mother worked hard to save. We made a promise to use it only if something were to happen to us, and today is the day of our mother's memorial visit. I had something I wanted to report to my mother at her grave, so I visited. "Mom, I'm pregnant. I'm sorry I couldn't let you hold your grandchild." I was told that my body was not very fertile, and I thought I might never be able to have a child, but I discovered I was pregnant a little while after my mother passed away. My mother knew until the end that I wanted a child, and she supported me. I think the fact that I was able to conceive a child, something I was having difficulty with, might have been a final gift from my mother.
Please watch over Alice so that she can give birth to our child safely.
Samuel says this and bows his head in front of the grave. The wind that passed through was comfortable, and I felt as if my mother had responded.